Let me guess, you're up to your nostrils in crap. Well, your interactive experience begins right now, making spiritual sense of headline news. Live from Internet USA, it's the Bee Sting Radio Show. With your host, Bee Sting.
Tonight's show. Ooh. Some people aren't going to like this. It's about money, war, and maybe the destruction of Earth in order to protect money and war. And as always, how God fits in. Go get some coffee for your brain and we'll be right back. Let's get the disclaimer out of the way immediately. Bee Sting Talk Radio is neither your minister nor are we your psychologist. Bee Sting Talk Radio is a marketing company that sharpens, focuses, and presents brand awareness for your soul. Read your Bible, talk to your minister, find a church. That said, enjoy the show. The intention of tonight's show is just another prime illustration of the difference between pure good and pure evil. We talk about it every week and how you, without knowing it, are waist deep in this eternal battle between pure good and pure evil. I want you to marinate in that just for a minute. Pure evil is deceit. Your life's wrought with evil, deceit, and most don't even know that they're involved in it, much less that the game exists, let alone what the rules are. In fact, you purchase this every day of your life. Now I'm going to go out on a limb, way out on the end of a limb right now, and watch me like a hawk in hunt mode for the rest of this show and see if you don't agree with me once the facts are on the table. People who claim religion starts wars are without a foundation, historically, in the last 1,200 years. That's a fact. There may be churches who started war, but it was never about religion, and I'm getting ready to do a little bit of understudy so that you see exactly what I mean. So to be clear, I'll say it again. Religion has never started a war, nor has any of God's people started a war, or those who fear a God of any sort. Not in the last 1,200 years. To continue saying so really is a stale argument. So instead of emotionally driven speculation, which most people involve themselves in and deploy with, let's start with historical facts. Let's run through the product. We're going to start with Rome, then we're going to return to the history of the U.S. and all of our wars, and then we're going to go through how those wars have blossomed into our reality today, and how they have created a new monster, all predicated on something that you aren't going to believe is the actual cause, and yet it is. It's time to change your opinion. It's time to put on your big people's pants. This story should sound really familiar to you. Before Julius Caesar led his legions into battle against the Celtics at Gaul, he concocted a cool little trick. That worked magic. And when he did, a global problem rose its ugly head. That shadow still exists today. Caesar found he could approach the Roman Senate, tell them some outrageous lie about how monstrous some mysterious foreign people were, what a threat they were. He could opine for hours in front of the Roman Empire simply by scaring the hell out of the Senate. Charge coin to Rome so he could build weapons to battle and defeat his supposed threat. Sold the weapons to the Roman Empire for even more coin so that the Roman Empire could then lend those weapons to Caesar's legions to war against the monster that Caesar presented and marketed to the Roman Senate. Caesar had stumbled on to what is a business miracle. Then he found he could charge coin to walk into battle with the weapons that were lent to him that he manufactured and sold to Rome to go fight a monster that he created. And, by the way, figured out after the battle, whatever was laying around was his booty. That was his coin. Booty, resources, slaves. And modern war was born. But so was the military-industrial complex. Somebody tell me one reason why Caesar himself wouldn't want perpetual war, death, rape, destruction of villages, families, slavery, servitude, and an office full of sycophants. Let's be honest. They kissed his sycophants. That's what they were. You ask Caesar, peace? Bad for business. And all Caesar needed to do was to sell another horrifying lie and another horrifying story when his bottom line dropped, when his cash register slowed. He went straight to the people of Rome through meeting with the Senate once. The exact same story since 82 BC, all the way up to today, right there. That's your family portrait of civilization and how far we've advanced. So the next time you hear somebody patting themselves on the back, talking about how far civilization and mankind has come, tell them the story. Tonight's show intends to illustrate what incredible bedfellows fear, war, banks, and money are. And boy, let me tell you something. You fold religion into the mix, you add that to the equation, and it's an orgy of windfall profits for the modern day Julius Caesar. Now, with all of those profits, with all the war and death and rape, destruction of villages, families, the environment, servitude, you think there's any evil in any of that? How can people not see that the war industry is the birth, proliferation, and existence of Satan incarnate? Our job at Bee Sting Talk Radio is to present patterns that busy people, preoccupied people miss, but patterns none the same, and they all include you, if not engulf you. They do because they're designed to. And the work we do, it doesn't represent your alarm clock. We're not trying to wake you up. We work more like a snooze alarm. We're meant to stir you a little bit, not wake you up completely, but to prepare you for when the alarm goes off. And it's going to take a world event to set off that alarm. And it will be born out of pure fear. That's how it's designed to work. Remember, quite often, pure evil doesn't appear straightforward. We don't see it come to us with horns and a pitchfork. Sometimes it's just disguised as something that you think you want badly, desperately. That's evil when it comes to you sometimes. You have to pray for clarity. You have to earn clarity. You have to think to get clarity. It just doesn't happen naturally. Not to the Roman Senate, and certainly not to you. That's why total concentration, that's why total education, that's why effort is needed. It is not a part-time job to be a good Christian. It isn't. Nor is it a part-time job to be a valued participant in a republic. Either way, you got to keep your head on a swivel. Let's talk a little bit about why you're so busy you can't pay attention to pure good and pure evil. You can't see reality when it's stuck in your face. There is a scientific and psychological reason why you are kept so preoccupied. Edward Bernays. If you don't know who he is, you should. He's dead, and he runs your life for you. He is the psychologist who invented keeping us so damn busy we couldn't find our butts if we sat in a fire. And you're going to think I'm crazy when I say this, but here is what he invented. The single most important tool. Product commercialization. How many ads have you seen today? Literally, you couldn't tell me. I bet you see more ads in a year than your grandfather saw in a lifetime. And most people think the intent of an ad is to sell you something. Buy this now. Nope. Look further into the darkness. You see it? The intent of every ad is to convince you of what you deserve. Meaning if you can't or don't purchase their product, then you've failed in life. You've failed yourself. You've failed your family. It's your fault. It's never that they price their goods and services too high. No, that's not a consideration. It's that you're less of a person if you can't afford them, or worse, you don't want their product. Product commercialization brainwashes people. It makes people camp out to get an iPhone. Take a second and think about how demented that behavior is. It makes people think they need something right now. And anyone who'd be honest with you that's in sales will tell you that if you can get a customer to a point where they need something right now, you've got a sucker on the line. Look how big, entrenched, significant, important in every daily life outside the pygmies in Africa that the ad agencies and the PR firms, what role they play in our life right now, how they form our opinion of us, what we want, what we need, what we just gotta have. It's designed to preoccupy you. This AdDeus, this thing didn't pop up overnight. It's been built over decades in the United States, ever since World War II. You know, in World War II, what you saved was a mark of what kind of person you were. And then just after World War II, Edward Bernays taught Americans that your image isn't about what you've saved, what you've earned, what you have acquired. It was about the products that you purchase and how they create your image. Bernays made it all about consumption. Ad agencies today have everything to do with Julius Caesar then. Believe me, trust me, just follow along. Ad firms always use young and attractive people in all their advertising. And everybody that doesn't know what the ever-loving daylights they're talking about, you know what they say? Oh, they just want to sell to young people. That couldn't be further from the truth. They want to sell to everyone. So why do they use young people to sell to old people? Well, their strategy is to tell you that you're no longer young. You don't belong anymore. Remember the quote, you show me somebody who's 50 years old and I'll show you someone who can't believe they're actually 50? I'm there now. Ad agencies use emotional blackmail to make you feel obligated for a deficit that you never created. But more importantly, they have taught you those rules. Put a pin in that, we'll return. Look at how much your self-image is formed by a bunch of people that wouldn't get on an elevator with you, would not share a cab with you, period. If you really look at the situation in an honorable fashion and think on your feet, you'll find out that the Bible, everything the Bible talks about, is the antithesis of what an advertising product commercialization is. Psychologically speaking, inexorably shackled to money, tender credit, borrowing, deceit, a false sense of reality, a false sense of security, this false sense that product commercialization offers you is intended to completely blur the cognitive difference between want and need and the pace at which you think you deserve it. Add that to the equation, you've lost your master, your authority, and your independent thinking. Do you know how many adults sound like 3-year-olds? I want that. I want that. Mommy, I want that. I see it on Facebook every day. It helps athletes sell athletic shoes to mothers who can't afford them because society has been so programmed that society demand her child has them to be accepted. Can't eat. The kid's foot grows more every day, but got to have those shoes. The child doesn't just need shoes anymore. He needs those shoes. Shoes that could get him shot on the street, but he needs Jordan shoes anyway. You know, the question should be, what about the mother sacrifices and the father sacrifices? What about their lack of family time? Their shortcomings, the pain that's experienced from all that, so that they can spend $225 on Jordan sneakers. You think Jordan cares? Do you think that Michael Jordan gives a damn? Nah, he's immune to that reality. He's a hero. He's a hero because the same advertising agencies and PR firms that get him millions to do shoe ads also get millions to make sure that his image is so valuable that people are willing to pay vast amounts of money for his shoes. We're going to break for a commercial, but when we get back, I'm going to tell you exactly why all of this is highly necessary in our day and time to steal your soul, to steal your time, to steal your money, and to steal your country. And why there is none more time to sit back and be idle and participate in the social welfare program of people who don't do anything, not as a Christian and not as a responsible citizen of a republic. We'll be right back. Let's talk t-shirts, shall we? Bee Sting Talk Radio started with a quality concept to print apparel that screams a message without speaking a word. With ladies' shirts that had to be all about style, good looks, and form-fitting. Men's shirts, tailored, period. No longer considered young, we offer shirts with a relaxed fit. Artwork and designs, we're talking the ever-popular Bee Sting Talk Radio designs, our Drifters Island designs, or our ever-popular Uck Fay designs, printed especially for the pig Latin aficionado in all of us. Visit beestingtalkradio.com today. Shirts that look great and sound even better.
This is Bee Sting Talk Radio.
Oh, you're trapped all right, girlfriend. In the first segment, we went over a few things. One, we established the fact that Julius Caesar created what we now know as the military-industrial complex, modern war. Two, advertising is designed to be shoved into your life to preoccupy your mind. Three, that changes your introspection, how you see yourself and value yourself. Four, how that opens you up to be completely manipulated. You're caught up. It is in a void of all logical scrutiny. People don't even think about this anymore. Well, it's just money, right? It's just too much money, right? It amazes me the amount of seemingly astute people who have no idea what money actually is. That's why when the government wastes it the way they do in trillions of dollars at a time, people can't take it seriously because they just can't get their mind around what money is. People work for money all day long, every day, and they don't understand it. They exchange their time, their effort, their sweat and toil. They exchange family time and experiences for money, but can't actually define what is money. How does money differ from credit? And what exactly is credit? Ask anyone to define the difference. Call your mom. Ask your brother. What's the difference between debt and value-based currency? Ask them to define usury or simony. Ask them what the purpose of a treasury bond offers America. Where does cash come from? And what branch of the federal government has the Federal Reserve? How in the world did we get here? They're changing our image, telling us what we need to have, what we need to sacrifice for it. And we don't even know the world's history and therefore, and logically, our own history, our own personal history. Is money directly conflicting with God? Is credit directly conflicting with God? That's your question. Not what phone do I need? What if I told you? What if I warned you? What if I proved to you that your faith And when I say faith, I define it as nothing more than your interaction with God and what happens in your mind and soul during your processes with God. That faith today is being challenged simply because you're being hoodwinked, because we don't know what's going on. By the end of this show, you will see money and credit in a completely different light. You will see how it influences your every thought and how evil those influences actually are. And when the light is directed at this subject, like we will tonight, you may well reshape, retemper, and resculpt a much stronger bond between you and God, and I promise you that if you're patient. So why am I tying together money, value, credit, interest, usury, and God? A lot of people are going to see that as a stretch, and here's exactly why. All wars, all assassinations of all political leaders, all the crazed lone killers leading directly back to nothing but private central banks. Not religion, private central banks. Their interests for their profits. You show me a war and I'll show you a private central bank that is trying to force their will onto the common people of a nation, thus debt, thus enslavement. I'm going to read Ephesians 6:12 again. It's one of my favorite verses in the Bible, and over and over and over and over again, you're going to see how this applies. Quote, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." Now, early on in the show, I scanned past the word usury like it was nothing. Usury is defined as lending money and receiving the principal loan after charging interest. And God must hate usury because he wrote about it all throughout the Bible. Plenty of references to usury, and seemingly for some pretty good reasons. In fact, he made 24 references in the Bible, in both the New and the Old Testament. He must not like it. Now, let's look at the Revolutionary War. If you ask most people, most Americans, what was the Revolutionary War about, they will tell you that it was taxation without representation. Wrong answer. Not if you believe Benjamin Franklin. The Revolutionary War was about King George III's Currency Act, ridding the colonies of our currency and forcing his private bank notes that he printed and forced the 13 colonies to use. Borrowed as a loan with interest from the Bank of England. Now, remember the Bank of England? They're owned by the Rothschilds. You will hear the Bank of England all night long. Quote from Benjamin Franklin, "The refusal of King George III to allow colonies to operate honest money systems, which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators, was probably, get this, the prime cause of the revolution." If anybody knew the real facts behind the Revolutionary War, it's probably old Benji, wouldn't you think? Then just after the war, here comes the Bank of England again. They ain't giving up. They're not going to give up. Nathan Mayer Rothschild of the Rothschilds of the Bank of London issued a statement throughout our government, throughout our colonies. Quote, "Give me the issue and control over the nation's money, and I care not who makes the laws." How arrogant. We just kicked his ass in the Revolutionary War, and his bank comes right back over here to inform us that they're going to lend us their currency at interest, which is the opposite of what we fought the Revolutionary War for in the first place. To rid ourselves of the nasty private central bank lending debt currency at interest. So, what did America do? What was one of the first things they did? You're not going to believe this. They let the Bank of London print our currency and then charge us interest to use it. We went right back to before the Revolutionary War. A central bank was set up in the U.S. and protected ourselves with a 20-year charter. We said, look, you can exist in the U.S. for 20 years. We'll see how it goes. For 20 years, they operated. We were so broke, we were in financial ruins inside 20 years. But guess what? The bankers were filthy rich. So Alexander Hamilton said, "No, no more. We'll just do this on our own. We can print our own money for free. Oh my gosh, we could have a value-based currency with a private bank that the government ran." So Congress voted the first central bank out of the U.S. Goodbye, get out. And charging no interest to its borrowers. How would you like to go get a $30,000 business loan over 30 years and owe the bank an aggregate of $30,000? Think about what that would do for our housing market today. Well, since the Bank of London, private central banks, and the Rothschilds feel like the whole world owes them everything, Rothschild put out another statement all over America, quote, "Either the application for renewal of the charter is granted for the United States, or it will find itself involved in a most disastrous war." Didn't happen, so the Rothschilds and the Bank of London went to England and they started the War of 1812. The Bank of England, the Rothschild Bank, promised that when England won the War of 1812, they promised to return us to a colony. So, the Revolutionary War was fought over King George's notes. The War of 1812 was fought over the Rothschilds and the Bank of London trying to be our central private bank. And after we re-won our independence in 1812, guess what happened? We plunged even further into debt. And Congress was forced to sign another charter with a private central bank lending money at interest, which even plunged us further into debt. Now, President Andrew Jackson, loved the guy, right? Swore to rid us of a central bank, largely responsible for his election in 1832. He ran on that ticket, and Americans loved what he was saying. Lined up to vote for him, he told the central bankers, quote, "I, too, am a close observer of the doings of the Bank of the United States. I've been watching you for a long time and am convinced that you have used the funds of the bank to speculate in the breadstuffs of our country. When you won, meaning make profits, when you won, you divided the profits among you. And when you lost, you charged it to the bank. You tell me that if I take the deposits from the bank and then annul your charter, I shall ruin 10,000 families. And that may be true, gentlemen. That is your sin. Should I let this go on? You will ruin 50,000 families, and that will be my sin. You are a den of vipers and thieves. I have determined to rout you out, and by the eternal, I will rout you out." Now, that should have been about the last thing we ever heard from Andrew Jackson, because the only reason why he didn't fall dead from his assassination attempt was because the assassin had two pistols and both of them failed simultaneously. That's right. As soon as Andrew Jackson got rid of the central bank in America, within a week, there was an assassination attempt on him on the steps of an office building in front of God and everybody. And when they caught the assassin, you know what he said? He was paid to do that because if Jackson was allowed to stay in office longer, money would be harder to come by. That leads us right into the Civil War. Now, if you ask the average American what was the Civil War about, most are going to tell you that the Civil War was fought over slavery and freeing black slaves. Not at all. The Civil War didn't have a twinge of internal nature whatsoever. It had both global overtones and global entanglements. When the Confederates started to secede from the nation, here it comes again, the Bank of London contacted President Abraham Lincoln and said, look, we'll lend you money to finance the war at 30% interest to the government. 30%, that's mafia money. Lincoln replied, I will not free the black man to enslave the white man to your bank, which is exactly why Lincoln trashed our debt-based currency, implemented the greenback, which was a value-based currency, because all things said and done, that was the only hope for the U.S. to satisfy the massive debt incurred during the Civil War. Now, immediately after the greenbacks were circulated, the London Times responded with an article to Lincoln's greenbacks, and it said, quote, If this mischievous financial policy, which has its origins in North America, shall become indurated down to its fixture, then that government will furnish its own money without cost. It will pay off its debts and be without debts. It will have all the money necessary to carry on its own commerce. It'll become prosperous without precedents in the history of the world. The brains and the wealth of all countries will go to North America. That country must be destroyed, or it will destroy every monarchy on the globe. End quote. The London Times, great friends with the Bank of London and the Rothschilds. Man, they just don't take no for an answer, do they? Those money pimps have tried to shove their hands in our pants since before the Revolutionary War. They just don't quit. So, to end the greenback, France and England together were prepared to invade the Union. They were going to invade America during the Civil War. The North would have been fighting two wars simultaneously, one with the South and one with England and France. And guess who saved us? Guess who backed France and England into a corner? Russia. Russia stepped in and ended that threat because Russia had a strong navy at the time. So what incentivized Russia to step in at that time period? Well, it was because Russia had a value-based currency and wanted to seclude Europe with their very few resources, their limited resources. The bulk of the global resources at that time in the world were either in Russia or in the U.S. Imagine that. We're a nation with a history and a future because of Russia, saved by Russia. How do you like that? There's some irony for you. Now, of course, immediately after the war, Lincoln denounced France and England for trying to invade us and get in the way of his value-based currency by applying their debt-based currency, and his greenbacks were doing just fine in circulation. Announced that he was without any pleasure bringing in private central bank and deleting the greenbacks for debt-based currency. Well, Lincoln was shot immediately and killed after the war. And immediately after his death, his greenbacks were ripped out of the bank and trashed. And then their debt-based currency from private bankers, borrowed at interest, was returned and injected back into the U.S. economy. Can you believe it? And from 1865 on, we're using debt-based currency from England. Then in 1933, the Rothschilds and the Bank of England, they weren't done. They gathered together with some other interests from around the world on a small island in America, in Georgia, called Jekyll Island. Them and there, and then they created the third American private bank, the third one, called the Federal Reserve. By the way, the Federal Reserve isn't any more federal than Federal Express. So next time somebody asks you which branch of the government handles the money, the answer's none. None. We print it for the Federal Reserve. They make interest off of every dollar that we print to lend us, so we can pay them back with interest, and we don't even know who they are. Now, a savvy, pissed-off American would say, who was on the Congress that voted this Federal Reserve in, and we don't even know who they are? Well, the answer to that question is nobody. The Federal Reserve was voted in by a Congress in the absence of that same Congress. There was a bill signed by Woodrow Wilson that gave the Federal Reserve all their power. That's right. The Federal Reserve Act was never voted in. It was never taken in front of the people. Woodrow Wilson just did it. And after he did it, he actually had the gumption to release this statement, quote, "I am a most unhappy man. I have willingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is now controlled by its system of credit. You're no longer a government of free opinion, no longer a government by conviction in the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men." Woodrow Wilson, Democrat, 1919. Poor guy. Well, let me tell you something, Woodrow. I accept your apology, even though you didn't really apologize. But what you did do was ruin the country. Because now we've got the Federal Reserve that has ties with the Bank of London, the Rothschilds, all of those people way back when. We only know that because they're the ones that showed up on Jekyll Island. And wouldn't you know, 1 year after Wilson passed the Federal Reserve Act, placing our entire nation and its currency, all of our business, all of our finances, all of it now held by international interests in Britain. And 1 year later, World War I started. That's right. Never before had the world been in a war. World War I actually started. And remember, the biggest profit margins and windfalls experienced by private central banks is during war. They fund it with interest. Let me tell you who started World War I, because you're going to think the Germans, right? Yeah, of course. You did your homework. You studied Austria, Hungary, and Serbia. Germany was only perceived as a threat to England. Nobody else. They weren't in the war. So the focus of World War I was quickly assigned to Germany. See, England was weakening. And still, their economy was based on banking and financing, and they really didn't have any agriculture or industry to speak of. You know, kind of like the way we are right now in the U.S. And as a result, Germany, which had a state bank under strict government control, lending value-based currency at no interest, became center-fixed in England's crosshairs. England, with their private central bank, distributing debt-based currency from a privatized bank borrowed at interest. No industry couldn't compete with Germany, had no chance of competing with Germany, and without any future possibility of competing with Germany in the marketplace. Germany was full of agricultural products. They had great engineering, and people loved their products in the open marketplace. It was that simple. But England made Germany the focal point of World War I. Through the press, as an evil empire, they were the main proponent of World War I. These were the claims made against Germany by England. So when England, at the end of the war, helped write the Versailles Treaty, they made sure that Germany was expected to pay the entire debt of the world to all the nations that were in that war, just to kill off their economy. You can probably see where this is going. The debt was 3 times their aggregate worth. Germany owed 3 times more than they were worth completely. Germany hit rock bottom. They changed their government, started a new value-based currency in a new central bank, and flourished once again, pissing off England and their bank to no end. The press referred to Germany's recovery as the German miracle, praised Hitler. Time magazine even featured Hitler as their man of the year. That's when Winston Churchill was quoted as saying, "Should Germany merchandise," which means do business, "should Germany merchandise again in the next 50 years, we will have led World War I in vain." Another Churchill quote, "We'll force this war upon Hitler if he wants it or not." In 1936, Winston Churchill said, quote, "Germany becomes too powerful. We have to crush it." Man sounds determined to clear the market through war, doesn't he? I mean, if nothing else, you got to ask yourself, if all these other countries are flourishing, why the hell doesn't England just have a privatized central bank that the government, oh, that's right, they have a monarchy. And in a 1939 broadcast, Churchill was quoted saying, "The war is an English war, and its goal is the destruction of Germany." See, it's pretty simple and logical. Germany's central bank was a threat to all central banks around the world while under strict government rule. And the only way to crush Germany was to create embargoes that started in every country whose central bank was threatened. And that's exactly what happened. In 1946, after the complete destruction of Germany in a war that Churchill bragged he started, Churchill said to Truman, quote, "The war was only partly because of fascism, but mostly about crushing markets," and admitted the war could have been completely avoided, quote, "without firing a shot, but we didn't want to," end quote. That's as many as 60 million souls lost dead over banking, dead because of private central banks who just didn't feel like being competitive. That was 1946. Let's fast forward not even 20 years. And that leads us to the sad story of John F. Kennedy. Now look, his father taught him well about the voracious nature of private central banking and lending debt current and interest, and banking was in the Kennedys' pedigree. It was drilled into John. It was branded into him. He knew well of exactly why President Andrew Jackson dismantled the Second Bank of America and circulated value-based currency. So Kennedy signed Executive Order number 1110, which concluded the Federal Reserve, and issued the United States note. Some of the listeners will probably remember them. It was a brand new value-based currency that didn't borrow from a private bank with interest, but used U.S. silver deposits and stockpiles to back the value of the United States note. It's vital to keep in mind that it was 100% constitutionally legal for Kennedy to do this very thing. And we all know what happened a mere 5 months later. But what most don't know are these 3 sticky, ugly, nasty, vile, ignorable facts. 1, a mere quarter mile from the kill zone, President Kennedy's motorcade stopped in the middle of the street. Now, regarding security concerns, this never happens. Whether security or war, you never make a target idle. That makes the best of targets. So, yeah, never does the president's car come to a stop. But it was stopped that day for an unexplained reason, and Secret Service riding in the president's car were ordered off 45 seconds before John and Jacqueline entered the kill zone. 2, the day after Kennedy's homicide, feds all over the nation hit banks all over the country and started pulling U.S. notes out of the banks and replacing them with Federal Reserve notes. The next day, 3rd, since we've returned to and remained with a debt-based currency and not returned to a value-based currency for some reason. You want to straighten out America's finances? Stat, simply replicate the German miracle. Create a central bank under heavy government regulations and create a value-based currency. That's it. All we've got to do is crank up the printing machines. We already do it, and it's not even for us. Of all of the major corporations, of all of the major cartels, private central bankers have the simplest strategy: blackmailing the masses into slavery after constructing a false sense of obligation to those same masses. You have got to see the similarity between the way they are enslaving us with their central private bank and how advertising firms make us feel guilty. That's why they educate us with this system. That's why they're so in love with false obligations. We didn't overprint the money, they did. Why the hell is it our debt? I need to queue up Julius Caesar to talk to our Senate about those monsters over there, and queue up the advertising and PR firms that have learned well how to manipulate your mind, because until you take the first 2 segments into consideration, you don't know what your reality is. You follow me so far? You can't tell me your obligation to this derivation of dementia. It's not possible. Look, it's simple. Our central banks made an obligation not to overprint paper dollars more than our gold deposits. They did. We didn't. What most don't understand is that they signed that agreement with your name, your family's name, your property, your money, your investments, and most importantly, the land in the United States that our citizens earned. It's not the Federal Reserve's land, but now it is, and I'm going to explain why, and this is going to piss you off. And I'm talking about places like Yellowstone, the Everglades, Grand Canyon, Yosemite, a part of 25% of U.S. landmass. The Federal Reserve not only overprinted Federal Reserve notes, but they also did so in bulk, far exceeding our gold deposits. That simple. And making money every single note that's printed. So naturally, other countries started getting very nervous. rightfully nervous. They had vaults full of our Federal Reserve notes stockpiled in vaults all over the globe in excessive amounts, far exceeding our gold deposits. So to avoid an international run at the bank, Richard Nixon, good old Tricky Dick himself, fixed the problem without asking or consulting the first citizen. In order to collateralize the loan debt run up by the Federal Reserve, Tricky Dick invented the EPA with massive and far-reaching programs, a multitude of which they're so overwhelming that even few politicians understand their limits. He created this out of the clear blue sky. And in doing so, the Federal Reserve replaced collateralizing the U.S. dollars from gold to using our national forests and parks. You heard me right.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the Redwood Forest.
Wait, what? Yeah, that doesn't apply anymore. That's right. Our land's now owned by foreign nations to collateralize overprinting notes by the Federal Reserve far beyond their laws that they signed. Every note a point of profit to the central bank and a debt to you and me. Yellowstone, Yosemite, Everglades, they're all gone. Most of the outer banks, gone. And worse, with Nixon's far-reaching plans, you can't even walk on the land anymore. We've got federal agents seizing property, U.S. federal property, and disallowing us to even walk on it. You don't believe me? Talk to some people in Buxton or Hatteras. See how they're followed like they're criminals if they even step on the land. And you know why? Because it's not America's land anymore. We've got federal agents that are protecting the property of other nations and a private central bank that overprinted money. But it's our debt and our obligation to follow their rules. Buxton, Hatteras people, sorry, they're just not your lands anymore. They are not your land at all anymore. They're not even the bank's land anymore. They're collateral for the bank's sins. That's how, through the network, news programmings, and the PR as advertising, they have made it feel like it's your obligation and your debt and not your national parks that you own. 25% of our landmass and our heritage, and I have even worse news. When Tricky Dick gave away our lands, he also gave away their natural resources, mineral rights, and deposits. Want to know why Obama doesn't drill for oil in America? It ain't our oil anymore. It's another country's oil because the Federal Reserve couldn't stop printing money because they were too damn greedy and wanted to shove it all in their pockets. That's why the only place we drill for oil is in the ocean. Why is it our obligation? And oh my gosh, but does it get worse? Here's the really bad news. The Fed so overprinted their notes. The government was forced to extend collateral in two ways. The natural resources under our land and oil deposits, mineral rights, that's all gone, okay? Here's the second way. We signed an agreement with all of the oil-producing nations around the world, most of which reside in the Middle East. The accumulation of this entire scheme, this scam, was called and named the petrodollar. Sounds harmless enough, right? And here's what the deal was. The U.S. needed all the oil-producing countries to sell their oil only in exchange for U.S. dollars. Only. It's the only way the Federal Reserve could actually collateralize at that point. And if done in exchange, the U.S. military would protect those nations using the U.S. military paid for by U.S. tax dollars, our boys and girls, to secure overprinted dollars beyond gold deposits. That's how much money they've gone through. That's right. You understood me correctly. It's a deal none different than the mafia's job description of the consigliere, who sits next to the mob boss. Unfortunately, the Fed uses tax dollars to support the military, so your child could join, fight, and die for lost U.S. lands, parks, and heritage while using other nations' oils just so the Fed could overprint U.S. dollars and profit from them, and we don't know who they are. We don't even know who they are. They did it. Why do we feel the obligation? But as America, we sold off our infrastructure and our manufacturing, so that's gone. Sent all of our jobs overseas, So that's gone. And you really don't have to do this too many times before you get other countries really nervous. So we create this GMO thing thinking that that is going to back it with our agriculture, except it's so dangerous and poisonous that ran off a multitude of countries. I mean, it's absolutely laden with health-related issues, and the world knows it. All the while, the U.S. is vomiting money into Israeli banks, and guess what? The Fed never slows down printing cash. As a result, the oil-producing nations start looking for other ways to secure their investments. I mean, they've got to sell their oil for U.S. dollars, except nobody wants to trade in it anymore. And what happens when you do business with the mafia, right? Regardless of how many times the mafia changes the deal, regardless of how bad the deal gets for anybody doing the mafia's stated rules, the consigliere is going to come to visit, and there is hell to pay. So in the year 2000, Iraq started putting their oil on the market for sale for the euro. 1 year later, the U.S. invades Iraq and kills, ready for this, nearly 500,000 people. And 4,500 of our golden men and women serving in the U.S. military while their parents pay the taxes to do so. We also hung by the neck until dead Saddam Hussein, and we sent a message out to the oil countries, didn't we, that traded oil for U.S. dollars? Didn't we? Nah. Muammar Gaddafi established a state-based bank using a value-based currency called the dinar. And Gaddafi made it public to everybody around the world that they were going to start selling Libya's oil for the dinar, not U.S. dollars. Other nations saw value in the dinar and started trading with them. So much so that France issued a statement claiming officially the dinar posed a global financial threat, meaning that they were undermining France's investment in the Federal Reserve currency. So the U.S. camouflaged their next act as support to the French regime. They invaded Libya and murdered Muammar Gaddafi in the streets publicly on the same video platform they used to hang Saddam Hussein. Then the U.S. imposed a private central bank and returned Libya's oil sales back into U.S. dollars only. And interestingly, the gold that backed the dinar and all the dinar that was pressed just simply disappeared, never to be seen again. Here's a real interesting note. You guys could probably start to see how this works. You really want to know why Iran is such a monster? Has no central bank, no privatized central bank, and no debt-based currency, and continues to sell their oil to whomever they choose. And here comes the U.S. media banging their drums and blowing their horns to dilute the message and to create an illusion designed and constructed for nothing more than pure deception, to tell us lies, and then to sell those lies on an emotional level so thick that we gladly offer our youngest members of America, our working force, to fight for a lie and die for it too. The U.S. media is a fraud. The hosts are frauds. The writers are frauds. The producers are frauds. All the cute little people at the desks are frauds. They know they lie to us every day, and they also know that they service satanic deceptions without fail. Snap to, forward march. They're more than happy to. The media has defrauded us into believing that we lose our fathers and our mothers during war, our sisters and brothers during war, limbs and lives for the freedom that no longer exists. Then our media slivers off their set to their sleek little sports cars for a martini or 8, whatever it takes for them to finally forget what sleaze bags they are, lying through their forked tongues. You don't think there's a little bit of Satan in all of this? Come on, they trade spoils so they can proselytize private central bankers and their wars and their massive profit margins. Real first-class evil shit here, folks. Pure evil. Private bankers creating a system that has more debt than wealth, making it impossible for us as citizens to escape that trap. That's before they even overprint. keeping good people enslaved. Just last week, Argentine President Cristina Kirchner pointed out in an emotional speech that she was afraid she was going to have her government toppled, and even predicted that she was going to be killed. Could you imagine? She said, so if something happens to me, don't look to the Mideast. Look north to the United States, to our government house. Just hours after the U.S. Embassy warned United States citizens to take safety precautions in Argentina, an aggravated Kirchner said, quote, when you see what's coming out of diplomatic offices, they better not come here and try to sell themselves as some ISIS tail trying to track me down so they can kill me. The media, the press, they'll hammer the public mindset into a brainwashing and never mention the fact that Argentina sells its own oil the way it sees fit. After over 100 million deaths between just the wars I alluded to, there's still struggles between municipalities, governments, and private central banks, ways and means of religions. It's just amazing to me. When really it's just the banks creating all of this. And every day our media wants to go to work for them, for finer attire, this other ridiculous notion. It's just a whole... Look, CBS News, CNN, ABC, Fox, all you guys, CNBC, I hope you're all listening to me. Go ask your Christ his opinion of the child in pain that's been burned by a warhead, that suffers by himself because his mother and father were killed. Go ask God's opinion. When a family walks home and their neighborhood doesn't even exist anymore, go ask God what kind of pain and agony that produces. And we just don't care. We're so busy with an iPhone, we don't have time to look at these pesky, nasty, boogery, sticky facts. Then go ask Satan if he flourishes in the mainstream news and what bankers serve up to us. Remember this, Muslims absolutely adhere to very strict and stringent religious codes. One of them is that they will not serve usury, meaning they don't borrow money to collect interests, in direct conflict with private central banks. You want to know why they're our chosen enemy? You could start right there. Now, for the first time ever, the Federal Reserve was just audited. Let me read you what they have lent out now. Want to know how much money they actually make? Citigroup, $2.5 trillion. Morgan Stanley, $2.04 trillion. Merrill Lynch, $1.94 trillion. Bank of America, $1.344 trillion. Barclays of the United Kingdom, $868 billion. Bears and Stern, $853 billion. Goldman Sachs, $814 billion. Royal Bank of Scotland, $541 billion. JP Morgan Chase, $391 billion. Deutsche Bank in Germany, $354 billion. UBS of Switzerland, $287 billion. Credit Suisse, Switzerland, $262 billion. Lehman Brothers, $183 billion. Bank of Scotland, $181 billion. BNP in France, $175 billion. The Federal Reserve has lent out $16 trillion in loans right now. 16 trillion. More than they could pay off our national debt tomorrow. But they're going to be too busy tomorrow overprinting more cash and charging us interest. I'm out of here. This stuff makes me sick. I've got to go. Thank you for listening to the show this week. Next week, we're going to have another really interesting topic. I promise you. So we'll talk next Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure you visit BeStingTalkRadio.com. It's your hub to everything Bee Sting Talk Radio, with clearly marked links to our Facebook page, our channels on YouTube, Twitter, SoundCloud, Blog Talk Radio, and a link to contact us directly. Keep your head on a swivel, folks. Pay attention to your soul and pray. May God bless you, and remember, all the tools you need, all the power you need is inside the Bible and the blood of Jesus Christ. Peace.